David moved down into the desert of Paran. A certain man in Maon, who had property there at Carmel, was very wealthy. He had 1,000 goats and 3,000 sheep, which he was shearing in Carmel. His name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. She was an intelligent and beautiful woman, but her husband was surly and mean in his dealings. He was a Calebite. While David was in the wilderness, he heard that Nabal was shearing sheep. So he sent 10 young men and said to them,
"Go up to Nabal at Carmel and greet him in my name. Say to him, 'Long life to you, good health to you and your household, and good health to all that is yours. Now I hear that it's sheep shearing time. When your shepherds were with us, we didn't mistreat them, and the whole time they were at Carmel, nothing of theirs went missing. Ask your servants and they'll tell you. Therefore be favourable towards my men, since we come at a festive time. Please give your servants and your son David whatever you can find for them.'"
When David's men arrived, they gave Nabal this message in David's name. Then they waited. Nabal answered David's servants,
"Who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and water and meat I have slaughtered for my shearers and give it to men coming from who knows where?"
David's men turned round and went back. When they arrived, they reported every word. David said to his men,
"Found it. Each of you strap on your sword."
So they did. And David strapped his on as well. About 400 men went up with David, while 200 stayed with the supplies. One of the servants told Abigail, Nabal's wife,
"David sent messages from the wilderness to give our master his greetings, but he hurled insults at them. Yet these men were very good to us. They did not mistreat us, and the whole time we were out in the fields near them, nothing was missing. Night and day they were a wall around us, the whole time we were herding our sheep near them. Now think it over and see what you can do, because disaster is hanging over our master and his whole household. He is such a wicked man that no one can talk to him."
Abigail acted quickly. She took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of roasted grain, 100 cakes of raisin, and 200 cakes of pressed figs, loaded them onto the donkeys. Then she told her servants,
"Go on ahead, I'll follow you."
But she did not tell her husband Nabal. As she came riding her donkey into the mountain ravine, there were David and his men descending towards her, and she met them. David had just said,
"It's been useless, all my watching over this fellow's property in the wilderness, so that nothing of his went missing. He's paid me back evil for good. May God deal with David, be it ever so severely, if by morning I leave alive one male of all who belong to him."
When Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey and bowed down before David with her face to the ground. She fell at his feet and said,
"Pardon your servant, my lord, and let me speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. Please pay no attention, my lord, to that wicked man Nabal. He is just like his name. His name means fool, and folly goes with him. And as for me, your servant, I did not see the men my lord sent. And now, my lord, as surely as the Lord your God lives and as you live, since the Lord has kept you from bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hands, may your enemies and all who are intent on harming my lord be like Nabal. And let this gift which your servant has brought to my lord be given to the men who follow you. Please forgive your servant's presumption. The Lord your God will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my lord, because you fight the Lord's battles, and no wrongdoing will be found in you as long as you live. Even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of my lord will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling. When the Lord has fulfilled for my lord every good thing he promised concerning him, and has appointed him ruler over Israel, my lord will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed, or having avenged himself. And when the Lord your God has brought my lord success, remember your servant."
David said to Abigail,
"Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. May you be blessed for your good judgment and for keeping me from bloodshed this day. and from avenging myself with my own hands. Otherwise, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, who has kept me from harming you, if you had not come quickly to meet me, not one male belonging to Nabal would have been left alive by daybreak.
Then David accepted from her hand what she had brought him and said,
Go home in peace. I have heard your words and granted your request.
When Abigail went to Nabal, he was in the house holding a banquet like that of a king. He was in high spirits and very drunk. So she told him nothing at all until daybreak. Then in the morning, when Nabal was sober, his wife told him all these things, and his heart failed him, and he became like stone. You don't need to write that down. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said,
Praise be to the Lord, who has upheld my cause against Nabal, for treating me with contempt. He has kept his servant from doing wrong, and has brought Nabal's wrongdoing down on his own head.
And David sent word to Abigail, asking her to become his wife. Thank you very much. Right. Okay. Oh, I didn't need this one. Right. Put that down there. Right, I'm going to get very confused. Great. Thank you very much. Long story, but you see it doesn't really, you can't really preach on it unless you know the story. Okay. It's taken an awful long time, isn't it, for David to actually become king. He was anointed and picked out by Samuel quite a long time ago. Must have been somewhere back in April, early in his life. And we've had David on the run, we've had David in hiding, we've had Saul trying to kill him, and now we've got this incident. And it is taking a very long time before God's calling on his life has come about. And I wonder whether in this time he was sometimes thinking, oh my goodness, I had that wonderful moment when Samuel came and anointed me, and that was so exciting. Yet since then, the gap between the sort of exciting prophetic calling and what's actually been going on in my life is so big. And I suspect for a lot of us, we can identify to one degree or another with that sense that, most of us at some point or another, God has spoken over our lives. We have a sense of God's high calling, God's purposes, God's goodness. And maybe it hasn't happened yet. Or maybe the day-to-day struggles of life sort of dominate, and the bigger picture and higher visions of God get pushed into the background and a sort of never-ending future. I wonder why it took so long for David to become king. Well, there's all sorts of reasons. God's got his timing, there's stuff to do with Saul, I don't know. But here is one important reason why it took so long for David to become king. CCF. Okay? Now, if Teddy was in the room, he would be able to tell me what CCF stands for, because he listens when I do collective worship at the village school. Village school is great, and I go in and I don't know, every month, every 2 or 3 weeks, and I do Bible stories. And following on from Christmas, I've just been doing incidents in Jesus' life since after his birth. I did dedication at the temple, I did him when he was 12 and got left behind at the temple, did his baptism, and we're in the wilderness being tempted now. And I was asking the children, why did Jesus have to go into the wilderness? They've got a brilliant motto at the school, their vision statement, and all their documentation and everything, every one of their policies. Their vision is aspiring to be the people God created us to be by growing the talents he gave us. I love that. It's a fantastic vision statement. And they talk a lot about growing your talents. But what I was saying to them, and actually this is the most important point of what I'm saying today, is, wow, why did Jesus have to go into the wilderness first? He was probably the most talented, well, he was, the most talented human being who's ever lived. He was going to teach like nobody had ever taught. He was going to reveal the truth about God like nobody had ever revealed it. He was going to raise people from the dead, heal them, cast out demons, calm storms. He sure had many talents, didn't he? But before even Jesus could be let loose with his talents, CCF is character comes first. Character comes first. Jesus had to go into the wilderness and he had to learn, I'm giving you my collective worships here, he had to learn not to use his power for selfish means, not to turn stone into bread. He had to learn not to use his power for personal glory, not to jump off the temple and let God save him. He had to learn not to sell his soul for power and have all the kingdoms of the world at his control. We're going to have Mr. and Little Miss Greedy, Little Miss Show Off, and Mr. and Little Miss Power Mad. But Jesus had to have his character proven, and unlike Adam in the garden, Jesus in the wilderness passed the character test. He didn't sin, he defeated the enemy. Now, and this is really what today's story is all about. David is in God's character-shaping process. And this is one of the most interesting and important stories along the way, along with lots of the other ones that we've only had time to skim over. So what I want to do today, I just want to have a quick look at each of the characters in this story. Let's start with Nabal, though I don't want to spend too long on him. No, I think actually something interesting has been shared by Hazel already today. It's relevant to this. Nabal is surly, mean, and foolish. And the Bible says, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. He was not a God-fearing man. He had built personal wealth. He built a sort of, a power base in his locality in the way they did in those times through livestock. And he was utterly given over to selfishness. Had no sense of morality, no sense of justice. And as we discovered, he was beyond redemption. And I don't know, we like to think that there's good in everybody, and if you just handle them right, you'll find it. That's what Neville Chamberlain thought about Hitler. There's no redeeming feature in Nabal. And sadly, there are people who are evil. There are people who do harm. If you come under their influence into their orbit, you will be damaged. A lot of these people end up in positions of huge power and cause huge and immense suffering and oppression for thousands and millions of people. But none of us are likely to go through life without, at some point or another, running up against somebody who mistreats us, who does us harm. And we can try and sort of, think the best of them, but sometimes they are genuinely bad. And they have genuinely harmed us. And they have been genuinely wicked, and they haven't repented. And we have suffered at their hands. But whatever level, whether we're talking about big things or little things, all of us will go through life and we will be mistreated by people at one point or another. And it is no good expecting that everybody will always treat us justly. We will always be dealt a fair hand of cards, and the other person will always treat us aright. Nabal was a nasty bit of stuff. David's men, we don't know the entire cultural context, but David's men were obviously out in the countryside, in the desert, and Nabal's shepherds and sheep and goats were all out, and they were acting as sort of bodyguards to this group of sheep and shepherds. Now, whether that was like a semi-official thing for which they were due pay, or whether it was simply that the whole region was full of vagabonds and ruffians who were out to sort of cattle rustle or sheep rustle, and David's men proved themselves completely honourable in an unofficial capacity. We're not quite sure. But either way, David's men had done good to Nabal. And at sheep shearing time, it was a big festival, and it was a time to distribute generosity and thanksgiving. And Nabal was nasty and mean. It's not completely David and Nabal, but he was nasty and mean. It's also my nickname, Hazel. That's why she's laughing. Yeah.
Sorry. She calls me Dable. It's my nickname. It's a sign of affection. But it gets even worse, we won't go down there.
We won't.
Move on.
Maybe swiftly on. But anyway, Nabal was thoroughly unreasonable. Now, we need to have ways of handling those situations where injustice has happened to us. Maybe little, maybe big, maybe deliberate, maybe accidental, maybe more felt than dealt. But bad things will happen to us. David's men were mistreated. And as we see later on, Nabal never did repent. We can't always get other people to bring justice into our lives. So what about David? Well, David sees red. He is outraged. He is aggrieved. He is embittered. He says, after all the good I and my men have done to his flocks and his shepherds, this is what I get in return. This is outrageous, unforgivable. I'm going to take matters into my own hands and I'm going to seek revenge. Very understandable. You may almost be sympathetic. The interesting thing is that David has been tested in so many ways already by Saul. Saul, to whom he had done enormous favours, not least killing Goliath, and playing his heart for him and soothing him. David had been a loyal servant, and Saul had repaid him by trying to murder him on numerous occasions. Saul has chased him into hiding, caused him to be a refugee, fleeing to Gath, the enemy of the people, having to feign madness, having to live in a cave with a bunch of ruffians around him. And David has shown exemplary character. He has not retaliated. Twice, God put Saul right in front of him and gave him the opportunity to kill him or take him prisoner. And David said, no, I'm not taking revenge into my own hands. He had passed some extremely challenging character tests. And he knew that it was not for him to seize hold of God's purposes by his own human efforts. I was reminded as I was preparing this, when I was in about I was probably doing GCSE O-levels in my day or whatever, we were studying Henry IV, I think, at school, Shakespeare. And Henry seized power illegitimately. And I remember my teacher saying, using this lovely expression, he said, his reign was besmirched by the stain of his usurpation. And we loved that phrase because we had no faintest idea what it meant, so he had to explain what each of the words meant. But I've always remembered it. His reign was besmirched by the stain of his usurpation. David did not want his reign to be besmirched by the stain of his usurpation from Saul. So he had not taken matters into his own hands. And then suddenly this upstart Nabal comes along and gets right under his skin. And David flips. And all his good character sort of falls away. And his instincts is just too much. And I am going to have it now. And he calls a curse on himself. You know, if a man of Nabal's is left standing alive. What's going on? What's going on? Well, suffice it to say, we're all vulnerable to falling, aren't we? And how true is it that we can sort of negotiate and navigate life very well. Lots and lots of good reactions, lots and lots of good responses to challenging situations, and then suddenly we can trip.
Oh, yes.
We can flip for doing all the right things, and suddenly we've lost it. I remember, Rachel's not here, but her mum Julie telling us a funny story once about Rachel's younger brother Eddie, who was very young, I don't know what he was, 4 or 5, and his mum was teaching him to answer the phone politely. And the phone went and said, hello, this is Eddie, who is it speaking, please? That's very nice. Then the phone goes shortly after, hello, this is Eddie, who is it speaking, please? And then the phone goes again, the third time, he goes to, who is it this time? He got it, he handled it right, but then it's just one step too far. One step too far. Hey, we're like this, aren't we? There are danger signs. I don't know, why did he flip with Nabal when he got it so right with Saul? Maybe he knew exactly how challenging it was going to be to deal with Saul. And this came up on his blind side as an unexpected irritation. And somehow he wasn't ready to handle it right in the same way. We can all flip. We can all handle things very well for a long time, and then something happens and we, very justifiably, my anger's righteous anger, righteous indignation, and we justify what is actually a completely wrong reaction. Maybe it's tiredness. We're all more vulnerable when we're tired. How many, don't put your hands up, how many of you behave badly more often when you're tired than when you're full of energy? I said don't put your hands up, behave, just have. It could be battle weariness. You fight the same battles so often and you fight them successfully, a bit like the Lady Graham, you get it right 2 or 3 times, but then the same challenge keeps coming, and after a while you've done it right so long, you just say, this time, I'm having it now. I'm doing these examples knowing myself. What about anxiety and stress causing you to react badly? Your fight and flight mechanism goes into fight mode because you're anxious and you're stressed. Sometimes it's irrational triggers. Probably things that have happened sometime in the past that trigger us in ways that we don't totally understand or we're not totally conscious of. And somehow it makes us mad. Who knows? Watch out for the tripwires that cause you to fall. Be aware of the devil's devices. He doesn't play fair. He doesn't play fair. He's got all sorts of strategies to get us to behave badly. And getting this unexpected encounter with Nabal caught David's defences off guard and caused him to take matters into his own hands and threaten to kill all of Nabal's men. Enter Abigail. Thank God for sending Abigail to keep David from doing harm. Ooh, how often do we need other people to call us to account when we are going off the rails? We need other people. It might well be our wives or husbands who are the ones who are there, who see us in danger of doing something rash or doing something wrong, and come in with the corrective word. Abigail brought wisdom and perspective, stood back from the situation, saw what was going on, saw the dangers, and brought a word from the Lord. Now, she intervened, by the way, not only to save David, but also to save her husband. If she hadn't done anything, her husband would have been, and all his men would have been brutally murdered by David's men. It wasn't like she was suddenly sort of betraying her husband. She didn't know God was going to strike Nabal dead. She was actually intervening to try and save everybody from harm with her wisdom. she had the courage to intervene and speak up. She could have been a shrinking violet and have stayed in the background as, oh no, my husband has done it now, what a fool, I knew he'd get his comeuppance sooner or later. She could have stayed at home and watched a bloodbath. But she had a little nudge from the Lord, and she had the courage to intervene. A very well-known cliche, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. In this case, a good woman to do nothing. She didn't make the mistake of staying silent when God put it in her hands to save the situation. And she did. And that begs all sorts of questions, doesn't it? We don't want to become interfering sort of do-gooders and busybodies and everything like that. But how much should we be standing up for one another? Now, it's interesting. She stood up to save a man of God from sin. Jesus calls us the salt of the earth. What role do we have in being preservatives against sin? Now, we 100% do within the context of the church. How much we can keep the world from sin is another matter. She couldn't keep Nabal from sin, and she knew it. But we have definitely got a calling to keep one another from sin. Now, I'm hoping that nobody in this room is about to go off and do something really awful. But if there is, and one of you knows about it, don't stay silent. We are called to cover one another. We're called to help one another. And not to be shrinking violets who just stay silent when bad things are about to happen. Thank God for Abigail and her wisdom. She also, interestingly, and she had a long speech, and I don't know if you remember all of it, but she started off by sort of telling David, warning him off taking revenge, but she also had heard from God, because she knew that David was going to be king, and she knew that God had plans for David, and she didn't want those plans to be undermined. David again. Thankfully, David, unlike Nabal, had a soft, teachable heart. He recognised God's rebuke and God's intervention, and he repented quickly. You could say, well, yeah, he would do, wouldn't he? But not necessarily. He was a headstrong